Today we're going to be talking about sustainable impact. It's part of a Deep Current series, and this is now, I think, number 7. And these alternate on a monthly basis between interviews with star innovators within the community, and then informational sessions that are relevant to helping organizations that are trying to make a difference in the world to thrive. So why am I here with you, right? So I trained in computer science. I did some work in educational innovation abroad. I went to medical school. I trained both at Dartmouth and then here at Harvard in internal medicine, global health and social equity. I did my public health degree, and then I got certified in informatics. And I'm a teaching attending at the Brigham Hospital. I'm one of the program directors, and I lead educational innovation within the Education Institute. But I'm also a dad, and I'm also trying to be a good father and a good husband. I was lucky enough to work with Paul Farmer, and he sort of really changed many things about how the world treats people, right? Both in terms of the dignity, both in the way that we try to create a preferential option for the poor rather than just the cheapest thing that they can pay for. Changed how the world treated TB, changed how the world treated HIV. So I was lucky enough to work with him in Haiti and in Rwanda, and then they were based here in Boston. He set this incredible example in his life where he was just seemed to be everywhere all the time, changing how things were done and always available and contributing. Many people who try to work in the same way that their superheroes work end up feeling like this. And I saw this myself, where I'd see people 10 years ahead of me in global health or in medicine. In the US today, 2 in 5 workers have levels of burnout. In medicine, it's 70%. So I started to need some way that I could use to defend myself. I was studying burnout and working with my daughter on a project to help understand burnout in the community, and realizing that I was close to it as well. Right? I was busy all the time, felt always on, right? Everything bled into the evenings and the weekends, and I could no longer be present, right? In the way that I wanted to for my family, for my patients, or make the changes that I needed to. And so that ended up resulting in a few things that I started building tools and techniques for myself. And then that crazy day happened where some of the tools that I built for myself, somebody else asked and said, hey, that looks pretty good. Could I have one of those too? And that led to a Kickstarter, which we did with our hardware device. That included then coaching, which some people wanted, including medical school professors of mine, apparently, which was a tremendous experience to sort of learn and understand what was there. And then evolved into this, which is MakeTimeFlow. MakeTimeFlow is a system now that involves tools and techniques that we use to help people pry time and attention back from technology, which is out there to take it from you. And then we combine it with techniques and tools that you'll see some of the books that we refer on. So instead of you having to read 10 to 15 amazing books with tremendous techniques, we can distill those into a few digital interventions that we can share with you. We do a bunch of digital diagnostics, and we'll give you your flow score so we can understand how to work with you. And then we know that making commitments to ourselves to create change isn't always as effective. So we use short-form virtual coaching to help people make change. We're going to cover a bunch of stuff today, and often, this is probably overlap from med school, where like they just give you a fire hose every day. Today we're going to cover a bunch of topics, some of them at lightning speed, because I'm just briefly going to mention it. A lot of this content's available online, either for free in the previous sessions that we've done. We did flow and deep work just previous to that. We did powerful time management techniques before that, and those are all available online for free. And then we've got a bunch of it in our existing flow content where you can work through it in a systematic program. The new thing that we're launching, though, is this idea that not only do people want ways to get information and some tools that they can use, but that we need community. We need community of people who are like us, who are trying to solve problems like us, because we'll learn a lot from those. And so we're launching the system of new 6-week cohorts, right? And the first one's going to launch in May, and you'll join us for a 4-hour workshop, not just the 1-hour lightning speed stuff we're going to do today, where you'll be trained in a bunch of the techniques. You'll train how to use all the devices and the tools that we'll give you. But you're going to create a community around you of people who have similar problems that you do. Then you're going to join us for 6 weeks with virtual check-ins every week, all the tools of the system that are available. And our goal, right, will be to help every one of you get to the next level in both productivity and balance. Right? There are tools that can help you just be productive, right, on a faster treadmill. But if that tanks your balance, it's not going to be sustainable. And that's why we're here today. I'm going to share with you a bunch of those techniques from it. Some of them I'm going to mention at a very high level. Some I'm going to point you to previous content. If you want more information, then Helly has a lot more info for you. We did have a one-pager. We wanted to give people a takeaway as well. Kelly has it, but unfortunately it's not printed here today, but we could send it to you if you need to.
Yeah, so if you sign up on the sign-up sheet,
Great.
we'll email it to you as a PDF.
It has basically, I use mind maps to develop a lot of my talks, which is why you'll see sometimes we go deep, and sometimes we come back up to the higher level. And this will just lay it out for you in a nice graphical format. So don't worry about taking too many notes. Besides, it'll also be online. Sustainable impact, what do we mean by that? And I think we're talking here about pragmatic personal planning approaches that will help you work more effectively while supporting your personal and your organization's well-being. I'm going to share a framework with you about how I think about the major components with this. CIC is always awesome because people come both here and then online, and they've all got different perspectives and experiences. And so I'm going to look to you during the discussion period, say, share some of the things that help you create sustainable impact for you, whether it's working out or a program or some relaxation technique that you use, but then also the questions. For this session, though, in order to like ground it a little bit, I wanted to introduce you to the persona for this, which is really a climate change entrepreneur. Many of the things that we're going to be talking about are going to be focused on sort of what might this climate change entrepreneur do. I think it also applies to anyone who's in the knowledge work part of climate change, so including the scientists, the engineers who are working in it, as well as people who are working in sales and marketing. But if you're looking for, sustainable impact for operational things, I think there's a big other literature related to how to make those things very efficient or change those things that we're not going to cover as much today. So Mackenzie, as you met here, so this is Mackenzie. This is a user persona building tool for you, which is available on HubSpot, which is super fun to try out. And she's got a lot of responsibilities. She's got different ways she is measured. She reports primarily to herself, right? She's got a bunch of things that she needs to do well, communicate her vision, work effectively with her team, gains information like most of us do, but including scientific literature. And then there are lots of challenges for her. She's really excited to start this and started out like really gung-ho. She came to the CIC session a year ago and knew that this was what she was going to do. But unfortunately, she's not doing so well. She's got a lot to think about, and she's trying to keep track of it all. She's starting to worry a lot. She's sleeping less, and when she sleeps when she's sleeping, she wakes up worrying about stuff. Her calendar is just a mess. Tons of meetings all over the place, and she's working all the time. And despite this, she knows that things are starting to fall through the cracks. So why is this, right? Partly it's because there are all these so-called productivity tools, right? They're like going to make us more efficient. You can communicate at lightning speed now, right? All kinds of things to tons of people. And there's real-time cool tools that startups use, right? Which you should be using. And you should have these corporate tools that you should work with your big customers for. And your family and friends will still be there. And sometimes urgent things are there, but they're a little bit lost. And then there are all these cool tools that you should be using to promote your vision and to stay connected. And it's resulting in this shallow, inefficient, error-prone, and tiring work, right? That's not just the way it feels, right? From neuroscience now, doing all these functional MRI studies, we know that this way of working is provably this, right? How inefficient? 20 to 40% less efficient. If I said I could give you a thing that would make you 20 to 40% more productive tomorrow, most people wouldn't believe you, and you shouldn't believe it. But this is one. If you change the way that you're working, not in this hyperactive hive mind way, it's going to be error prone. They're going to be 10 times more effective to fix than they are to prevent. And this is not just errors in complex plans. These are errors we can measure in reading and walking, right? Things that are really basic for us. And tiring, we know that when we do glucose uptake studies, these are massively, there's much more energy required to do multitasking than there is when you can be focused, right? So it's going to be tiring. But, of course, there's an app for that. How do people try to solve this today, right? Well, there's apps that can do really wonderful things. They're great to download. There's some amazing books, right? And I hope that some of you have read some of these and are using some of the techniques today. Right? Unfortunately, the books are easy to buy. The app's easy to download. But then creating the time or making some change for yourself to do these sustainably, just that hasn't been happening. All right. So we're going to say, where are we going to get to? So Mackenzie's field's really hard, right? It's climate change. But her experience, her balance, her productivity, and her potential for impact have all actually radically improved recently. Most days, she's got a clear mind. It's decluttered of her tasks, which are in her task trust system. She's built up her ability to do deep work. And she starts most days, actually, doing real deep work, rapidly learning about new advances in her field or rapidly developing new important strategic roadmaps, grants, writing contracts, and doing talks. She helps her small but her committed team work really well together. She helps them focus and then refocus their efforts towards the same goal, even when they change, which happens a lot in startups. And she and her team are actually also really living really good lives. While they don't work as many hours as they did in other startups they were part of, their product and their impact are way higher. And they can now bring their whole selves to work. Right? So that's where we're going. Okay, sounds great. How are we going to do that? Okay, so in this framework, there are going to be these 4 things. I'll try to keep reminding you of like these are the top 4 things as we go through it. It'll be in the document that we can share with you. And these are managing yourself well, managing uncertainty, managing your team well, and impact practices, right? Like most self-improvement talks and most coaching stuff, these are easy to say, right? But hard to do. Many of them would be many, many workshops by themselves, right? Years of sort of effort and practice. What I'm going to try to leave you with, and you can tell me after if we succeed, is like at least in each one of them, I want to give you one actionable thing that you could try tomorrow, right? To see if it's going to work for you. The most important one is managing yourself, of course, right? So not only is it important for yourself, but as Chris and I were discussing, it really sets the direction for your whole organization, right? People learn so much by just watching and observing others. And the way that you work and the things that you value and how you spend your time is going to be sort of represented in your organization. We focus on 6 core aspects of helping people manage themselves well. So first, it's knowing what you're doing and not worrying about not doing things. And that's really embodied in a task and a project trust system. We'll talk about what each of those specific terms mean. Being able to understand valuable effort versus effortful time. Right? There are very different ways that you can sort of think about working and how you generate value. How to deal with entropy, right? And that's really centered around calendaring and email. How do you deal with inertia? It's really focusing on procrastination. And then the final 2 elements, arguably the most important, is that you are your most important resource. You are a human brain inside a human body. Right? And this we're going to explore attention capital theory, this new theory of how to thrive in the 21st century and what it means for you. And then we're going to talk about wholeness and the evidence about how wholeness can actually increase your productivity. All right. So first is, how do you know what you're doing? As you know, Mackenzie was really struggling because she was trying to balance all these things. She had scraps of paper, she was using 1 or maybe 2 digital task systems, and then her whole team had committed to some online tasking thing. And then she had all her emails, and then she was putting stuff in calendars. Not uncommon, right? Really super stressful. One of the best things about a task trust system, and it certainly happens for most tasking systems when you get them first, right, is it gives you the ability to declutter your mind, right? When you probably all had this experience, but when you don't write some small task down, even if it's not important, your brain will spend the rest of the day giving you these reminders of this thing that you're supposed to not forget, but then somehow you'll still forget it on the way home, right? And then you'll be stressed out about it. So the key thing is to get these things out somewhere into a system where you can quickly get things into it, right? Not loading up that other web page and then logging in through my organizational sign-up sheet so I can enter a task into the system that everybody else has access to. Nothing like that, right? It has to be effortless. I'm just going to get it into a system. And then I need to be able to reliably get it out, right? When I want it and when I need it. That's some of the core elements. That, for me, forms the basis of a trust system. Okay, tasking, right? So there are 4 core buckets. David Allen's book on getting things done was wonderful. I don't know if, has anybody read it here? All right. What did you think of it?
It's great.
Do you use it all the time?
As you said, it's very obvious, but it's hard to do, right?
Yeah. And he's got some lovely algorithms in it, certainly worth looking into. What I got out of it was really that there are like 4 big buckets of tasks, right? And this is just how I use it to manage it. So there's a today list. The today list is prioritized, and I've actually time blocked so that I can get those tasks done today. Otherwise, I have to really think, can I really do this thing? So that's today. Then there's next. Next is if I had some free time today, I would do that thing next. And that's a prioritized list, right? Because I just want to be able to take it off the top bucket. Those ones I look at each day. And then there's a later bucket. And the later bucket is like some tasks just go straight into that and they never emerge again, right? And that's just a giant bucket, totally unsorted. I look at it at most once a week. And then there's this big bucket that is greatly underutilized, which is the not doing bucket, right? And that's the one that can truly make you time, which is, yeah, I'd like to do that, but it's going to go in my not doing bucket. Does everybody know the story of Warren Buffett and how it's related? His story of prioritization. So Warren Buffett was asked by his pilot how he is so successful. And he said, it's a really simple technique. I'll teach it to you. And the technique is you should sit there and write down the 25 things you want to do in life. Right? And it's hard work. Just write it all down. Then you're going to prioritize it, and you're going to prioritize it in order. And you're going to take those 5 things and you're going to write it out so you can look at it every day. These are the 5 things you're going to do in life, right? For now. Then you've got these 20 things, and you're going to write those 20 things in not doing. And that's going to go in your not doing list. And you are not going to touch those things until you've done these 5. Right? That's the power of focus constraints. So don't underestimate the power of the not doing bucket either. For most people, tasking is going to end up being some kind of hybrid system. And I thought, I just said, hey, people are using these multiple systems and things are falling through the cracks. You can use a hybrid system as long as each tool that you have has a specific job and one job only, because then you always know where to go for things. People end up like letting things bleed over, and that's when it causes problems. So what do I use? So I use a digital reminder system, so Apple reminders, because it's just there all the time, and it's just like this long infinite backlog, right? And then I use my calendar to like say, these are my booked events. Right? And then sometimes it's like, I want to think about this on this day. And then I use a paper workbook, right? And I love technology. I have been trying every to-do tool since they came out. I'm always waiting for it to solve my life. Some of them have been very interesting, but I've gone to paper more, and I'll show you one of the examples that we have. And the reason is that paper has 2 big advantages. And one big advantage is it's physically constrained, like your time is, right? So if you filled up your sheet, you have to be very cautious about adding yet more stuff to it. And then 2 is it's just there and it doesn't crash, and I don't have to do anything to access it, right? So those have been very powerful tools for me. The other big thing is that, well designed, it helps me think about things in different levels and in the richest possible way, the way that I can just draw and write. Right? And so the levels that I like to help people think about are both at a monthly level, a weekly level, and a daily level. So what do those things look like? The workbook starts out by asking you to write something in each of these quadrants. We'll talk about the literature of why these quadrants. And so it's something for yourself. What's a goal this month for yourself? What's a goal for you with your family or home life or important relationships? What's a goal for you at work? And what's a goal for you in community? Right? And it asks you to think about each of those and put something there. Then it asks me to sit here, and I actually do this. There are actually 2 months for me in the workbook. And the first thing that I do is I write down the numbers in here. And the reason I don't put the numbers in is because the act of physically writing down each of the days for 2 months shows you how many days you have. And that's why this sheet is called the gift of your future self. Most of us are super stressed because we want to get all these important things done this week, which is not possible, right? By giving yourself the gift of your future self, you get to write them down of like, I'd like to start this here, this here, this here. And it gives you this feeling of like, I can reprioritize it. There's one new column that most others don't have, and that's this hopes column. And that's often like, this is what I'm hoping for this week. Because you can't always plan to fit everything in there, but I still don't want to, damage or hurt anyone's hopes for what they could accomplish. Then we start thinking about weeks. And there are 2 ways that we think about weeks. Most systems start out by asking you to create some giant list or immediately prioritize the projects that you're doing. But I find that I need space to bring in all the thinking that I can do. And so I've got this open white space area for brainstorming. And so I use mind mapping, I use sticky notes to figure out everything I'm thinking of for the week. And then I can prioritize what I'm actually going to get done or not. I was totally sucking at finishing my weeks well. I was totally ending up, despite doing a ton of stuff, I would leave the week feeling like I had more on my plate than I started with, right? I could never win. I could never win a week. And then I started doing something different with my goals. There were all these goals that were there, and I divided them into 2 categories. The vast majority of them are stretch goals, right? These will be nice to do. And then there's one other ones, and there are only 1 or 2 of those, and they're called solid goals. And the solid goals have a checklist of things that you have to do. We've got an article that can tell you what all of these are. And when you do this and you take the hit of saying, like, I'm going to define what my solid goals are, and I only get 1 or 2 of those, right? It clarifies your purpose for the week, and you end up winning your week. Changed the experience of it for me completely. And then I block my week out, right? So I do this time blocking system, and then the goal is to design the blocks of your week. You'll see that there's some hints here to say deep work, suggested, flex blocks there, and shutdown. We'll talk a little bit more about those afterwards. We'll talk a little bit about how you might be able to find time to do time blocking if you're not doing it yet. We give people a lot of different templates. This is one that I started with. It evolved over time, and I talked a lot about that in the last session, so you're welcome to listen to it there. But this is one for people who have more energy in the morning. This is one that works really well for them to do important and creative work. And then there's sort of the social, collaborative, shallow work time, and then there's flex and shutdown ritual time. So that's the week planning, and then you get into the day. And in the day, there's a section to declutter your mind. What were all the things I was worrying about? What's my detailed time block for this day? And you want to start your days fresh to some degree, right? And then you want to be able to re-block them as needed. That's what's here. And then a quick place where I just capture my to-dos. If you've got a quick place you do it digitally, that's totally fine. And then there's a small checklist down here, which just reminds me to do my shutdown ritual. We talked a bunch about this last time. This is the thing. If you learn to do this well, you will get your evenings and your weekends back. It's the biggest balance intervention I can offer to people. And the key thing for most people that they don't realize is it's not actually about convincing other people that you should be able to go home. It's about you convincing your brain that everything that you're going to worry about tonight, or think about checking your phone, or worrying to check an email, is actually got taken care of, right? You've either got to plan for it later, or you're going to do it tomorrow. That's what you need to do, and that's what the ritual is designed to help you do. So that's tasks. Projects are far more complicated. They're really complicated because many of you are going to be involved in doing really complicated projects, and you're going to have to work with a lot of people and their dependencies, and you want to keep tracking that, and there are people you have to report back to. There are lots of really expensive tools that can be amazing, right, that can help you do those. Most people confuse the fact that they work as a tool like that with their own project planning, and they think that I'm just going to live inside that. And that causes lots of distress. The reason it causes lots of distress is that, one, you're not responsible for everything on the project, right? Even as the leader, you're delegating and moving things, and then handing things on to move forward. The other part is that your success in the week shouldn't be dependent on a system that anybody can add something to or modify at any time. And so I work with people to say, like, you should really have your own project trust system, right? And it's worthwhile. You'll use the other one to communicate with the rest of the people, but you're going to have your own roadmap. And that's where rather than having people think in task lists, which can be super satisfying and checklisty things, but that roadmaps give you much more flexibility. Yeah, your task list might be this linear structure, that's how everything's going to work perfectly, but you'll go along and go, if that doesn't happen, what'll I do then? And if that doesn't happen, you'll be far more able to adjust your projects and think through things that you'll realize, I can make impactful decisions now without having to wait for these other sessions. So thinking in roadmaps and having them be your own personal project roadmaps matters. All right. Being busy, working hard, right? We hear this from entrepreneurs all the time. Like, I want to work hard. This matters to me, right? I want to be doing these things. And the experience is like this. This person's killing themselves. They're in their lull period. It's intellectually much more hard than it was in the morning, but they're sticking to it. The challenge is that we know those things are not always generating a lot of value. Elon Musk may be carrying in, syncs into Twitter, but unless he's expecting them to produce the same pin the whole time, having somebody work 16 hours a day is just going to tank your productivity and your creativity, right? Unfortunately, for human beings, in factory settings or pure mechanical settings, you can go for long periods of time without necessarily affecting performance. But that is not true for knowledge work, right? For all of us, it's this concept of the difference between hours worked versus the value generated. I've worked and sort of been the executive in a bunch of companies where it was really hard for me to explain to the engineer how the thing they were working on was going to affect care. But it was worth the time for me to do it, right? Could I create mechanisms that would share that through? For many people, this is easy to start with, I want to create a successful company, but it's not clear to them how they're generating value on a day-to-day business. Is your job to answer emails? Is your job to have lots of mini meetings? So how do people explore value generated? Because the thing that they can measure is time spent, right? And they're often sacrificing that at the expense of families or their own personal health. So I have a question, and this one is a massive one that's totally worth the time that you would spend for days or weeks with your team to get this right, and then for everyone to like be reinforcing it. The technique that I use for myself to understand if I've truly understood the value of it is this question. What could I do to generate 80% of the value I could create today in the next hour? It's a shock, right? For many people, I'm trying to say, like, look, this data that shows that your 8-hour workday itself is too long and that you should be shrinking it, down. For deliberative practice, it's around 4 hours. If you're a superstar athlete trying to maximize your performance, or a thinker, we can see that it's mostly 4 hours that you get true impactful work in. But this one is the one that radically changes your day. If you sit down and you can figure that out, often it's going to be like a few emails, it's follow-up systems, and then it's like figuring out this main risk, right? Then the rest of your day is very different. If you can't answer this question and you're like, I'm not sure what this is, then you should spend your time thinking about value and how to create roadmaps that clearly link what you're doing to the value that you're hoping to create. All right, one technique. Okay, the other one about managing yourself well is how to deal with entropy. And this, unfortunately, is the one that we don't have much time to spend on, but we spend a lot of time with people helping them deal with it, because these things matter. They did a study of 1,700 white-collar workers in the US and around, and on average, these employees spend half their workday receiving and managing information rather than doing anything with it, right? That's a huge cost. Like, that's a gigantic cost, because that time is not the same as managing it. Like, they're managing and processing email, they're dealing with calendar and scheduling requests, which is not the same. So you want to figure out ways to not do that. For calendaring, I would say the main thing that I would have you start working on is to be using time blocking. And time blocking, not just to block out your day, but to design your week. I've given you that slide that showed you some of the time blocks that we use. Critical things that most people don't include are flex blocks. I swear you'll get 40% of your tasks done in a 1-hour flex block at the end of your day, because you'll have started many of them, but then not been able to finish them. In that final block, you'll be able to finish a whole bunch of them. And the shutdown ritual are going to be key. The key step here is you're not going to be able to, if you're not time blocking now, you're not going to be able to do it this week, and you're not going to be able to do it next week, because they're filled with a ton of small meetings already, right? But 2 weeks from now, you're going to be able to look at it and say, I'm going to start blocking out some time here. There's a whole bunch of standing meetings. Maybe I could suggest that we move them to a central part of the day where it's not going to be as disruptive to me or my team. The other one is email. And this is just an ongoing, everlasting thing, now extending out into Slack and other ones. And the two techniques here are VIP email. You should figure out a system in which you can choose to give certain people the opportunity to interrupt you, right? But the vast majority of their email doesn't come near you, and you just look at it when you're ready. The other big one is to just batch your email, to figure out ways to top the notifications and then create time blocks to let you deal with email and then make them shorter and shorter and shorter as you can. We'll be coming out with a video about how I use this system to process like about 1,000 emails in an hour once a week and keep on top of my email. So that'll come out in a little while. If you're interested, just email us. The other one is dealing with inertia. And then what does this really mean? So this is the procrastination. And this is the one where if, like Helly's been doing these, they're called these daily kick butts. They're a 5-minute call to help people get new habits. And one of the biggest habits people need help overcoming is procrastination. Not because like they can't be accountable to themselves, but being accountable to somebody else is enough impetus to get them over there. We've also designed a specific button just for this, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So what are some techniques that you can use to overcome this? This, again, is one that takes time, and this is one that you'll need to practice. But a few things you can do is just schedule it, right? Schedule this, put it down for a 5 or a 10-minute block in your calendar. You're likely going to move it the first few times, but each day you're going to try to recommit to it. It can build up over time, and then finally you can do it. I would strongly suggest that you don't do it later in the day, right? It's very clear from the research that if you put it earlier in the day, you're much more likely to do it. Later in the day, there are two things that affect us. One is you get decision fatigue. So you're less like, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. And then the second one is that it seems like that there's a decrease in our ethical nature, our morality, after a lull period at noon. And there's only one technique that we'll talk about later that can help you restore that. So people become less ethical and moral as we become tireder. The other one is to just do one thing. And that's why I built this button, because I was struggling to do these urgent, but these important but not urgent things. And so this row here is a chore row. This is chores and interruptions. And I use it to give myself credit for doing chores. And this was the button I built up to doing. I would do one 10-minute chore a day. what I found was 80% of my chores actually can be done in 10 minutes, which was great. Not all 80%, I mean, I'm just saying a single chore. Once I'd started something that was going to take me longer, I would have all this energy to finish it so that I just never had to do that thing again for that period of time. So this idea of just do it, right? So figure out some way to say, I'm just going to set a timer and I'm just going to try to do it. And the other one is to celebrate it. Holly and I had this experience where we had this 10-minute chore timer. We're like, can I carry it around with me? Why do you want to carry it around? Well, because it's got this little chip inside it and it sends it to a server. And when I do it, I darn well get credit for it. Even though nobody else looks at it, I know that it goes into the server and I could look at it if I needed to. So give yourself some way to get credit for it or celebrate it. The last two sessions of how to manage yourself well are really centered around this topic, which is like that you are your most valuable resource. And then the same one is like the time is actually one of your most limited resources. Money you can get more of, people can give you money, nobody can give you time, right? You're the one who has to manage it. You're a human brain and a human body. Why does this matter? Historically, it's not mattered a lot. You look at the Industrial Revolution and the ideas of us as machines and just working, and then this way that we've structured our time periods where you're like, I have an 8-hour day, I should just work productively in that 8-hour day. We had a huge science of process that came up with Taylorism about restructuring how factory work was done. And the truth was that it was far more effective to take the factory work and break it up into complex components that were hard to figure out from the outside, so cognitively a little bit more challenging, but much more efficient for us getting the thing to that thing, right, in the line. Right? It turns out, though, that in the 21st century, something different is going to apply. So that was like industrial capital theory, so traditional capital theory. Cal Newport is proposing this new theory, and this is attention capital theory, which is in modern knowledge work, the primary capital resource is human brains. Or more specifically, these brains' ability to create new value through sustained attention. You say, but AI will take care of this stuff for us, right? It's going to be very effective in some pattern matching areas, but the truth is that our brains still are massively more connected, right? And we're designed to be pattern recognizers too, and problem solvers specifically for human beings and for quality of life. And that's going to continue to remain important as well. Cal Newport describes this as what's it going to take to thrive in the new economy. Right? And that's two things. We talked about this last time. You have to quickly be able to master hard things, and you have to produce at an elite level in both quality and speed. Right? If you and your company can do this, you're going to stand out, right? And you're going to succeed. You're going to utilize AI because you're going to learn about what's going to be applicable and where it's going to fail, and you're going to be able to take advantage of that as you solve the important problems that are super complicated, that we've got no data sets to help them solve, which are the new problems that you're solving for today. The core technique we explored a lot last time was doing deep work. And this is really professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. As described in his book, it's valuable, it's rare, it's meaningful. If you build up your muscle ability to do deep work, you're going to stand out wherever you are. And there are some rules that we explored last time about how you can help yourself to do this. This is also closely related to this concept of flow, hence in the MakeTimeFlow part, which was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work, and it's now really being explored in human flourishing. And this is the idea that the optimal experience of human beings tends to happen in these states in which our skills and the challenges that we're facing match, and we can see and adapt to them over time. You hear about this in the elite athletes all the time, but it can happen for knowledge workers. And in the studies that he'd done, 70% of the time at work, you have the opportunity to experience flow, but most people don't develop the practice to apply it. So this is stuff that we explored a lot last time. It's worth learning how to do it. You can do it while doing the dishes. You can do it with chores at home. You can do it a lot of the time at work if you know the skills to apply. And then you're in a human body, right? So your human brain inside a human body. Does wholeness matter to us? And this is work by Professor Friedman here. And he took a bunch of 300 executives who hadn't reached out to do this, right? They just took it inside an organization. They said, we're gonna ask you to do something different. They all wanted to work. They all wanted to succeed at work and career. That was their focus. And he said, look, I'm gonna ask you to write down those goals in those 4 areas, right? Home and family, community, society, self, mind, body, and spirit. You have to have a goal for each of those. And then we're gonna help you do that at work. So they would help them in the organization to do activities for each of these during hours of work. And then they measured them over time. And so the amount of time they spend at work hours went down, right, to around just over 6 hours. But their productivity went up by 10 to 13% across the board. Their engagement and their sense of well-being went up drastically. Right? So this is the data you could walk into any organization and say, I think we should make the opportunity for people to bring themselves to work. And that's why we have these 4 areas. All right, that's managing yourself. Managing uncertainty is another big area. If you're trying to do new things, right, then you're going to have some means to deal with uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in many of the projects and most of the innovations that are there. And the big sad news is that most innovations fail, right? So stats from the Project Management Institute show that like 80% of projects don't achieve the results that they set out to achieve. Enrico Coera has this comic to identify why most projects fail, and that's because the work as imagined in the conference room is different than the work as done. Right? So here, this is where the idea for a new EHR or the app starts getting a little complicated. Right? But that's not how most people like it. Most people don't like looking at uncertainty. It's risky for us. We've had lots of evolutionary practice of saying like, avoid it, just wear the blinders, keep going. Most of the people that you work with will want this kind of view. They want you to write a budget that shows this. They want to design a project plan that looks like this, a waterfall, a constant, solid one. Yeah, we'll do a bunch of magical coding here, and then everything will work, and there'll be no problems testing, and then we'll just release it, and everything's going to operate perfectly, right? People love this. This is what, it's like risk-free fodder, but everybody knows that these are going to fail the vast majority of the time. While it's important to know how to generate these pretty Gantt charts, right, which are accurate only when they're actually published and then inaccurate for the rest of the time, it's really important to learn a few other techniques for this. And the one that I would point you towards is Agile software development has developed a lot of techniques which are relevant to general knowledge work about how should you think about dealing with uncertainty. And the key thing for any system that you're going to choose, and there are lots of these different ones, is to choose something that seems to embrace change, right, over resisting change. Any process that is super resistant to change and is dealing in an area of tremendous uncertainty is just, you're going to spend a lot more time fighting the system than getting value from it. This is the manifesto for Agile software development. It remains a breath of fresh air if you ever have to work with software people, but I think it's true for software development. I've done a lot of teaching of this, both here at Harvard and at Yale, around teaching people Agile software development, so we can't cover a lot of it here, but I do think it's going to be very relevant to knowledge work. The one thing that I would point you towards for any of your projects is the difference between creating just a Gantt chart and creating a task board. A task board just has lanes. You can use a free tool like Trello to do it, right? And that can create a simple understanding of where things are at. All right, managing your team well. The key insight for me here, there are going to be a few, is this one from Jeff Patton's book. And this is the sad truth, that shared documentation is not the same as shared understanding, right? And it's worse than that. A shared task list is not the same as shared understanding. And you've all experienced this if you've ever been working on a project. You had a good task list, but they were doing something different, and then things didn't fit together when it was there. And the key thing here is to seek tools that help you develop shared understanding. This has been a big lesson for me. I loved lots of tasking tools, and it's fast to make mind maps and documents and to show them during the Zoom meeting, and then everybody goes off and does their own thing. But it's very different than spending the time to make sure that there's shared understanding for you and your team. A tool that I think is very powerful is this user story mapping. And this is Jeff Patton's book. It's delightful. It's got some wonderful cake jokes in it. So even though it looks like a techie UX book, I think it's really useful for any sort of business development project because it's really focused on helping people develop shared understanding. So while I recommend the book, and I think it's awesome, right, the truth is that you actually know how to do most of this already. So I'm just going to walk you through sort of what the fundamentals are. Right? You just need to know how to tell stories about how your solution helps someone. Hopefully it helps a bunch of people. And you tell all those stories. You're going to capture these, right, by talking about it, which is very rich, ideally in person, but in other means if you need to, and then capturing small phrases of it on 3x5 cards or sticky notes. Right? So then you can point to it and say, we were talking about that thing? Yeah, we were talking about that thing. Somebody else can grab it and then just write on it. And then you can arrange these things into an actual narrative flow. Everybody's going to have their perspective of the elephant, right? And then you're going to arrange it in a wall on a narrative flow. How does this tell the actual story? You're going to instantly see a bunch of things there, I guarantee you. right? Which is you're going to see a bunch of gaps of things that you didn't realize were missing, and then you're going to fill those in. And then you're going to argue, discuss misperceptions that you have about what each of you are doing. And then you're going to create streams. And the streams are a super powerful part where you actually take masking tape and you just draw it on the wall, right? And you've got your beautiful narrative flow. And then you start saying, okay, what's the first thing we should do? Do we need to meet a deadline? What are the essential elements we need to deadline? Those go above the line and everything else goes below the line. Do we need to maximize our learning in a particular risky area, or do we need to deliver the first thing? And then you draw that together. You do that as a team. You see it. You can walk around. You can point to it. It's user story mapping. It's centered around stories that we tell each other. All right. The other big power up that we've helped with teams, and we've done this with a variety of different teams in some of the organizations, both here and then in Dartmouth, is helping them to establish some basic team norms. And you have a lot of power here. And the power is really that you could easily establish team norms that help maximize flow and deep work, right? You might be working in organizations where this doesn't happen, right? And then you'll have had an experience of it, but there are easy ways for you to help do this. And the one is to be thoughtful about meeting times, right? Not before 10 a.m., which is generally for most people going to be best for deep work, and then not after 4 p.m., where it's going to be best for flex and shutdown times. Challenging when we're working with international teams, right? But there's still ways to make some of them work, and then you just do that on specific days, right? So you have days where you adapt. The other one is to be thoughtful about response expectations, and this is probably your greatest shield against the hyperactive hive mind. And you just establish, like we do in medicine, a hierarchy for triage responses, and then you make explicit how you think you're going to respond. If it's really urgent, call me, right? And then I will either step out or I'll call you back within an hour. It's going to be interruptive. You're going to have to bug me, right? It matters that you're going to take that extra step. You can Slack me, right? You're going to @mention me to make sure that I don't have to scan every single Slack channel I'm in, and I can just go to a specific area. But my status is going to tell you if I'm away or not. We integrated the device so that when I'm in deep work, I'm just set to away, and you're not going to expect me to break my work habit and reach out to you. And then for email, you're going to use it as it was intended, as an asynchronous communication, and you're going to expect a response only in a day, right? You're not going to expect me to respond to you every day within a few minutes. All right. Rapid fire, we'll get you the list of some of those. Down to the last section, which is impact practices, right? What are the things that you could do, practices that you might consider including in your week or your days to say, this might not have an immediate outcome, but it's going to help me get to the next level in terms of my impact. Right, so we talked about one. Deep work, I think, is probably the most impactful one, right? Along with flow. But there's another one which most people don't realize, and there's a lot of literature coming out to show us why this matters, and that's relaxation, right? When we give people problems to solve, and we do this functional MRI, so this is showing you where the glucose is being taken up, shows you which sensors are active. 3 brain centers light up when you're solving a complex problem. Now I give you another problem, it's still those 3 centers, right? When you switch from one problem to another problem, it's still those 3 centers, right? So these centers are active all the time. This is why, unfortunately, for complex tasks, we are not multitaskers. It's an illusion. The data is suggesting that you're going to be more error prone, it's going to be more effortful, and you're going to make more errors, right? And it's going to be much more inefficient. But when you're monotasking, then it's working. This center here is in the prefrontal cortex. It's one of the most highly interconnected parts of the brain. So it's got centers from everywhere. It's part of another network that we've been studying in a different way, right? So we've been trying to understand how do people relax, what happens in relaxation, how do people maintain a sense of moral center, how do people recharge, how do people have new ideas? It turns out that the prefrontal cortex is involved in this area called the default mode network. And that when it's relaxed and it doesn't have a problem to solve, and that could be even it's distracted by audiobooks, by binge watching, it's not resting. When you go into this default mode network, instead of relaxation and this turning off, what happens is that it starts coordinated activity with a lot of other centers in the brain, right? And this is why in the shower you have that brilliant idea, because you've given this part of the brain time to rest, and then it's doing this coordinated activity, and it's starting to solve problems in interesting and creative ways. It's letting you reprocess and relearn from experiences you had from the previous time, but you have to have that period of time without it. And that's where it's become, this idea of breaks are really a superpower. There is a hierarchy of breaks that Daniel Pink has explored in his book that we could talk about after. But even just 5 minutes can matter for you, right? To step up and step away. And this is also where lunch is a superpower, which is described in the book on the scientific secrets of perfect timing. Lunch without your phone, right? Ideally outside, ideally talking to other people about different things, lets your brain do that kind of relaxation and a coordinated activity. This is the thing that can help you have that non-effortful afternoon where you're going to this trough, right? And like you come out of the trough and have a higher level of performance afterwards. That's why it's a superpower. Otherwise, your trough just continues and the afternoon sucks. And the final one is golden time. This is really, that clock has stopped. The golden time is really a concept that we'd rename something so it become more acceptable in the work environment. And golden time for us has a manifestation in this one. Like, so these timers are all different and they've got supposedly juicy colors. And then this top one is golden time, right? So we try to help people establish this. Golden time is based on the idea that we know how we learn best, right? And we learn best through play, even adults, right? Golden time is professional playtime, giving people permission to have professional playtime. Do any organizations do this already, which might give us some data to show that it helps? Maybe you've heard of one or two. One is Google, right? This is 20% time, right? So you come in for 1 day a week, you're getting to work on whatever it is that you want. Okay, a bunch of fruitery projects must have come from that. What came out of 20% time? Google AdWords, Gmail, right? Impactful things. That's the time you're really going to make these leaps. You need to give yourself, there's that new technology, you thought it might work, but you don't have an immediate application for it, but you want to spend some time playing with it. You need to give yourself that. We help people start by taking 5 minutes of personal break time as golden time, and then move them up to 45 minutes, but then ultimately to try to help them get 4 to 6 hours a week of some kind of professional playtime, right? That's the stuff that's really going to accelerate you to the next level. And then you can do things that look more like this than just the day-to-day busyness. So that's now how we've covered the framework. Now we're here together. You've all got diverse and amazing experiences. And the hope was that we'd spend a few minutes at least just talking about, does anyone have other practices of sustainable that help them sustain impactful development and work? Or does anyone have any questions?
I'll say, sometimes in order to maintain like successful work, this is like a little bit personal, but sometimes if I'm going through a lot of emotional stress, I actually budget time to cry. I force myself to emote, and that way it's like, as you said earlier, like it's out of your system, and then you can like focus on other things. But there's a lot of like pressure to like maintain and be sane and professional and keep it all in and be put together, and sometimes it's just like I just need to like in 5 minutes just go for it.
Yeah.
Privacy of my own home, and then it's out of my system, and I'm like.
So powerful.
Yeah.
That sounds very powerful. I'd found the metta meditation. Is anybody? That's the loving kindness meditation. I found that very impactful as well, because often when you're trying to do good in the world, it's really hard and it's not going as quickly as we want, and ways to forgive ourselves and give ourselves space to just be there. I personally would love it if we were like, we should also have 5 minutes of just being ecstatically happy. Like, if you figure that out, let me know. I want to try it too. Great. Charlie? No?
So I trained as a scientist, and so you get to learn to be very aware of when you have blockages in thinking, knowing that you're personally responsible for everything to move forward, knowing when you need to like put energy in the system to just let your brain go nuts.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I brought that into the corporate world, and my whole career, I've always had problems of like, when I tell people, I'm not doing this. I'm walking out. I'm gonna go for a walk, right?
Yeah.
I've done that like my whole life, and people are like, "What are you doing?" It's like, but I'm like, look, I'm not gonna get anything done. You're not gonna expect me because in science, you're like expected to be there all the time.
I know.
I was able to pump a lot of papers out with less time because I had a pattern of working, of like when I did the work, when I did the data, and so it's been very helpful in the corporate world.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
And then the thing that I noticed is for the last 10 years, I've worked anywhere, anywhen. So I've not really had an office, but I've worked with a ton of companies. And when the whole pandemic hit and people were talking about working from home, I knew that people didn't know what it really meant to work. not in an office, right? Where you're personally responsible for your stuff. And a lot of people, I was expecting a lot of people to have problems with time management. Right? And all the comments you said about email and, responding in a day, my rule is within 24 hours, I'm not expecting you to respond right away. Because if I need you to respond right away, I'm texting you.
Yeah.
And usually when I meet people for the first time, I say, so let's be clear of how we talk to each other. You want me, text me. If you don't want me, send me an email. I'll check it when I get to it. And I don't have any notifications on my computer. I don't get any, maybe Teams, because those are messages, right? Immediate, if they're mine. But general messages, I don't. Everybody gets email. Why do you need email notifications?
Yeah.
Everybody gets email. Anytime you look at email, there's something new there, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you don't need a notification.
Yeah.
If someone wants to get to you, text me.
Great. I see the other sessions starting. I want to make sure we give them time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this journey. We covered a bunch of stuff for the framework. I hope you find your space. Great.
Please make sure you sign the sheet there.
Thanks.